So now we're into pillar number 2, which is all about our ball setup. Now for me, setting the ball up on your tee is a task that we can do at 100%. So there's no reason why every kick at training, every kick we ever do in a game, the ball setup can be set up exactly how we want it at 100%. So I always remember when standing at the back of my mark, I was really happy with how the ball was looking. If we're looking at the back of the ball and really happy with that setup, we're going to be a lot more confident when it comes into the kick. First thing I want to talk about when it comes to ball setup is the valve on the rugby ball. So on most match balls it sits within the seam, and for me I always had it valved down. So I don't really mind if you have it valved down or valve up, just not sitting on the side of the ball. It does have a bit of weight to it, so it can cause the ball to wobble. Next thing is talking about the rugby ball seam. So at the moment this seam is lined up perfectly at the camera. Now if I actually roll the seams in, you can see that that top seam and the bottom seam is actually falling over and rolling. So this is going to affect the ball flight. Same thing as well. If I turn that ball out, the top seam and that bottom seam are now falling over. So depending on your kicking style or what ball flight you're after, you have to be aware of what your seams are doing. Again, the rugby ball is not this perfect shape. It has got seams and it has got weight that we have to control. When it comes to low tee kickers, whether they're using the RB Wolf or the RB Wolf Plus, another thing that we can do is actually roll the ball out so that we can expose that sweet spot as well. Also, we can lean the ball forward, and again, it's really going to expose that big sweet spot of the ball, and hence why on the back of the RB Wolf kicking tee, I just wanted that big drop off. So the reason that I like just a single height kicking tee is every time I put the ball on the ground and the tee on the ground, it's the exact same height. So I know that no matter what, there's been no change in my tee, and the height that I'm setting the ball up is the exact same every kick that I'm taking. So now we're into pillar number 3, which is all about our long target. So for me, I've heard a few different things when it comes to aiming our kicks. Some people aiming for clouds. I don't like moving targets. Aiming for people in the crowd, that might change. What if you don't have a crowd or there's no grandstand behind you? So for me, I'm all about having that long target in the distance. As you can see there, G's standing directly under the post. So for me, that's a close target that isn't far enough of the distance. We want to have something through the post, 20-30 meters, that's on the ground, that's the line of the target that we want to start our ball flight on. So for me, I always had a right to left ball flight, so I always started at that target of G, so just 1 meter inside the post, starting down that right corridor of the post with my natural draw to the middle of the post. So it really worked for me. It was what I always tried to achieve when there was no winds or any other factors. Started down that right corridor and the ball would always come back to the middle of the post. So as you can see now, G's moved back. She's 20 meters through the post, which for me is now a long target. So quite often when we have sideline kicks and we get wide out, our target is far away in the distance, so it's actually a much easier kick, and for some reason those kicks feel easier and we get a much better ball strike because we've got that long target. So when we get kicks just like we are here around this 15-meter line or even closer to in front, we quite often look up at the post and just see this big open space, and then we don't actually have that long target on the line that we want to kick through. So that's why I'm so big on this. And lastly, aim small, miss small. So a lot of snipers use this. They aim for a really small target, which means that they miss small. So for me, I'd be aiming for G's left boot. So now we're into pillar number 4, which is all about our approach to the ball. So we quite often see kickers on TV, your Dan Carters, Johnny Wilkinsons. They've got really unique things within their kicking technique. When you're starting out, you've got to start really simple and feel what's going to work for you. So for me, whenever I'm starting out with a kicker, I always get them on 45 degrees. So hence why I've set up just on this cross so you can see the 45 degrees. For a start with my body, well, I want to have everything at the back of the ball. So starting with my feet at the back of the ball, hips at the back of the ball, chest and head, everything focused. That way, as I'm coming into the ball, there's no angles that I've got to try fix when it comes to my kicking technique. Quite often when we're approaching and we tuck my shoulders under and get on a big angle, I've got to try fix this in my follow through and often can't get things going through to target. So keep things really simple for a start: feet, hips, chest, head, everything coming into the ball at the back of the ball. So quite often with our approach in games, we actually change how we approach the ball. So especially at the start of the game where we've got heaps of energy, we're quite excited, sometimes we take a really quick first step. What will happen if I'm big here, once I get to the ball I'm going to be really crowded and not be able to get through my full range of my kicking technique. So for me it was something that I had to try work out. For me this first step was really slow and really small. It just meant that once I got to the ball, everything, my plant foot, and I had enough room to use my full kicking technique to get through the ball. So just be really aware, whatever you're doing at whatever stage in the game, that first step is really consistent. If you nail that first step, everything else will be consistent. So practicing your approach is really important. So for me, a 45 degree is really important. I have to try really make sure that I'm going back on that 45 degrees. So as you can see here, if I take one wrong move at the start, clearly I'm not at that 45 degree spot that I want to try be at. So it's a visual thing, it's a practice thing. Also just with your steps, again, if at the start of the game I'm really excited and I get big and really try to get back, I'm going to be a ½ meter from where I actually need to be, which is consistent to my kicking technique and to my approach. So what you can do to practice this, for me, 45 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, just make a little mark on the ground just at the front of your toes and both feet. Then you can go back into the ball and practice to see how close you can get again to those two little marks. And for me, I'm actually 1 inch away from where I was. So get some real consistency in your approach, practice it and play around with how accurate you can get to getting to the back of your mark. So now we're on to pillar number 5, which is all about our big strong rodeo arm. So we've already covered this off in the body training a little bit before we've got into this session. With the rodeo arm, I wanted to come up with a name for it. There was a really easy coaching cue for players to use and pick up on when we use it. So the reason why this rodeo arm is so important is so that we can actually use our upper body strength along with our lower half of our body to put energy and power through the ball. Our human body's got this amazing fascia that wraps us like a rubber band, and this anterior oblique sling along with the posterior oblique sling can really help to co-activate and put energy through the rugby ball. I see a lot of kickers that have got a rodeo arm, but they're actually not getting the max amount of energy that they can get out of this rodeo arm. So if my rodeo arm is low and lazy, it actually means that my extension out the back isn't going to be as big. So I'm not going to get that nice big hip extension and knee flexion alongside a big strong rodeo arm. So if this is lazy, then quite often we miss out on energy that we can put through the ball. So some more detail on what we want our rodeo arm doing during the kick. So pre-kick, we want to use this for our extension. We get our good hip extension, plus we're using this big strong rodeo arm to store energy. So just with this, don't over rotate. So we just want it in line with our chest on where we want to go. So we don't need to pull back, getting our chest rotated. So again, we store energy pre-kick. At the time of impact, my rodeo arm is lining up with my target, so hitting the ball, rodeo arm is in front, and then we want to go past our body and help with that flexion part of the kick. So extension out the back, we get good flexion, our rodeo arm comes across our body. One thing you quite often see is we store all this energy and then we chop down, which is going to stop our flexion. So the last thing we want to do is come up short with our follow through and flexion. So big energy stored, impact across our body, which is going to keep our upper body tall and get that follow through nice and big through the target. Pillar number 6 is about our plant foot. Now when you watch most international kickers, they're actually not landing in the same line as their target. They're landing around about 30 degrees. So quite often it was coached for a long time that your plant foot had to land in the same line as your target. So for me, doing a lot of research, working with a lot of kickers, watching thousands of kicks, you see this plant foot actually landing at 30 degrees. Now the reason why is the human body and the angle that we come on with that hip joint being a ball and socket joint, this plant foot actually enjoys landing at that angle. It just means that we can get through the ball and our follow through can get through to target along with that kicking foot to target as well. So the question often comes up on where this plant foot should be landing. So behind the tee, in line with the tee, in front of the tee. So for me, it's really important to have a look at where the strongest lockout point is. What's the lockout point? So G's locked up, hip, knee, foot is in line. She's really strong and powerful. That's where she wants to be making impact. So for a lot of kickers, they actually find that getting in front of the ball, so long range kickers with big long levers, actually are leaving their plant foot slightly behind the kicking tee. It's where they feel like they're the strongest. For a lot of kickers that like to kick the ball low to the ground, so G gets a bit of a lean on because that's what she does when she approaches the ball. The lockout point is actually closer to the midline of the tee. So video yourself kicking, see where you're looking the most powerful, and then from there you can play around with where this plant foot is landing. You do need to give yourself some space, so we don't want to crowd the ball because bad things happen when we block the ball and leave the ball to the right of the post, but we do need to find out where we're the most strongest and where we're the most comfortable. But again, just to cover off those points, we don't have to be landing in line. We can have up to 30 degrees and just find out where you're going to be the strongest with that lockout point as well. So just on video to show some of the different effects that what a plant foot can do with where it's landing. So if I get really crowded on the ball, I'm not going to be able to get through the ball with a nice hard foot. I'm going to probably hit the ball a little bit too high up, closer to that ankle joint. So crowding the ball, wrapping the ball a lot, a range of different things can happen. We can leave the ball over to the right, or because we're swooping, get a big rogue hook on it. If I get too far back from the ball, quite often my foot gets through, but we're not hitting that nice hard foot knuckle. We get a little bit tinny and we get that undercut and a whole heap of backspin. If we get too far forward, and again, we're not comfortable in this position, again, we're getting through the ball really early, and of course everything's going to the right, so I'm going to leave the ball over there, and it's not my strongest point. I'm probably still going to have my knee bend. I'm not going to be in that nice locked out, hard, powerful position. So that's why it's really important to watch your own technique, find out what's going to work best for you, and see where you're getting that big, strong lockout point. So we're playing on a really muddy ground where I'm not really too confident that I'm going to get my plant foot nice and stable. How do we adjust with this? So what I used to do with my approach is I used to give myself just a little bit higher on the ball, so that when I arrived at the ball, my plant foot wasn't coming in at such a big angle. I could be a little bit squarer and trust this ground that my plant foot could get set. So play around with that. Again, it's something that worked for me in a really ugly, muddy conditions. You did have to make a small adjustment because we were coming in a little bit squarer, but I would rather get a good balanced plant foot so I could get a nice strike on the ball rather than slipping out and then not even getting a chance of getting the ball over. Pillar number 7 is all about our kicking foot and the position that we're getting into. So we need to get it into the plantar flex position, which is pointed toes really hard and expose this big hard foot knuckle. So I quite often call it trout foot, so like a fish flopping all over the place. If we don't get that foot nice and hard, we can't get a big hard strike up the back of the ball and be really powerful and get a good strike. So it's really important, again, with that body training stuff, to really train our foot position to be in that nice hard plantar flex position. We want a hard foot on every style of kick that we're doing. So quite often with drop kicks, or when we try to get height, we actually turn our foot up and try to scoop it. We still want to keep our foot nice and hard and locked up. We just may impact at a higher point with our ball drop. So it's really important every kick to have a plantar flex foot. When we're goal kicking, we actually want to get some elevation in our kick. So sometimes we see a soccer effect where our foot gets too side on, where we're trying to push the ball along the ground, hence what they do in football and soccer. We still need to stay up the back of the ball so we can get that nice elevation and allow our follow through to get the elevation with that big hard foot. So depending on what kicking tee you use depends on how you get your kicking foot up the back of the ball. So if you're using the RB Vortex mid-cut or a tee that's slightly higher, we can allow our foot to get up the back of the ball, nice and strong, plantar flex, and probably on that angle there, really up the back of the ball, which is nice and strong. If we're using a low kicking tee like the RB Wolf, we still get a nice hard foot, but we actually get slightly lower. So quite often our body's in a lower position, a more angled position. Think of a guy like Dan Carter at the point of impact. His body's on quite a lean because he's nice and strong at that point. So when you're doing your body training drills, it's really important that you're training your body to get into the position that you want your foot to be in at the time of impact. Pillar number 8 is our foot and hips up the back of the ball. So for me, kicking off a tee should feel just as easy, and you should be able to get just as nice a strike as kicking out of hand. Quite often when we kick out of hand, the ball's in front of us, we get a nice strong strike, elevation's not a problem, and everything's in front of us, in front of the ball. So when we kick off a tee, quite often we get too side on and actually leave our hips and don't get anything behind the ball. So for me, it was a big thing from my approach was actually getting slightly higher on the ball. So when I took my approach, instead of being on that 45 degrees, for me to get that nice feeling of being behind the ball, I just took a small instep. That meant that when I got to my strike and got to that big strong lockout point, I felt like I was up the back of the ball with my foot, but also my hips had some power going through the back of the ball as well. One thing that's really important with getting your foot and hips up at the back of the ball is just being aware of not sitting on the kick within your hips. So quite often when we kick out of hand, we're big and tall, big extension, our hips are really strong. We need to have that same feeling through the rugby ball. So almost like a hip thrust in the gym, we're using our hips to get that nice hip extension. If we stay sitting in the kick and stay in that sitting position, it's really hard to get a lot of power through that ball. So at the time of impact, be strong through your hips and allow that foot to get up the back and really use that hip energy to get some more power through the ball as well. Pillar number 9 is all about momentum, and when I think about momentum, it's winning this half-metre pre-ball and then winning this half-metre post-ball. So generally the first part of the kick's really easy to do. We're coming in strong, good body position and getting our plant foot in a really good position. So we've got good momentum. At the time of impact, we really want to be nice and tall and over the midline of the ball. That's going to help with our momentum as well, rather than being behind the ball. So we've won this half-metre. It's really important, and why I like the hop technique, that once we've made impact, that we're actually hopping through and winning this half-metre with our body getting through there as well. Quite often we come to the ball, and if we're leaning back and get this plant foot locked up and straight, pull away on that C shape, we don't win this half-metre, and as you can see, my body hasn't won the half-metre through the ball. So really crucial thing when you're watching yourself on video, win this half-metre, win that half-metre, and you will have won momentum through the kick. With momentum on your approach, kind of like a plane taking off, we've got to build speed. So again, with that first step, if we're really quick and get moving too fast, we're not going to be controlled and balanced at the ball. So for me, it was all about that slow first step and then really building momentum into the ball. So that's going to help winning that first part of momentum as well. Just a cue when it comes to momentum is that this plant foot can't be a big hard locked out foot brake. So if I'm landing here with a straight leg, it's going to be really hard to get through this ball really well and get moving forward. So this leg's got to be soft, it's got to be able to cushion ourselves and get balanced. That means that my big strong kicking leg can get through and I can actually get my momentum moving forward. So just watch this plant foot on video again. If it's big and straight, it's probably going to be hard to get going forward. It might be causing that C shape. Keep it balanced so that you can be nice and soft and balanced, and then getting through to target as well. Pillar number 10 is stay in the kick, so commonly known as keep your head down. So keep your head down for me isn't as good as cue as stay in the kick. When I think of keep my head down, it's getting really closed off and keeping my head down, sometimes causing that real compression and chop down feel. So for me, stay in the kick is the better cue, because it means that I'm going to finish my follow through and finish the job with my body, win that half-metre, all those good things we've already covered. One thing I do want to bring up is nose over toes. So using this pole, you can see that my front of my foot is in the midline of this pole, and keeping my nose over my toes is a really good cue for keep your head down or stay in the kick. So if I'm kicking the ball, and you can see here that I'm actually forward of my toes here, I'm in a positive position, and my body weight and momentum is going forward for my kick. As soon as my nose breaks back, you can see that I'm leaning back and losing power through my kicking foot. So from the side angle, it's a really good place to take a video from and just check that cue is, am I keeping my nose over my toes through the kick? Any kick, whether it's a goal kick or a punt kick, anything out of hand, keep the cue of keeping those nose over your toes. So why I like staying the kick is quite often when we do make impact with the ball, our eyes are really keen to look up. That means that we're going to lose that nose over toe. So stay in the kick until you've finished that hot part of the kick and won that half-meter post the ball. So that doesn't mean keep your head down and compress on the ball. It just means that get through your follow through, enjoy that hop to target, and then we check for the ball. If we try to check for the ball at the time of impact, we're going to lose our momentum, we're going to lean back, we're going to lose that nose over toe. Win that half-meter, stay in the kick, get through your hop, and then check for your ball. So pillar number 11 is all about parking kicks. So like what just happened then, I missed my kicks. Now when it came to games, you've got so many other jobs to do as a goal kicker and as a player on the team. So you need a way to park kicks, move on quickly, and problem solve why you missed that kick. So for me, I had 3 reasons why I missed. My first step was too quick and too big, so I got too excited, which means I was cramped at the ball. The second reason was I didn't stay in the kick long enough. So what we've just spoken about, staying in the kick, I'd come up too early and check out of the kick too early. And the third thing was just Peter. So I did everything I wanted. I had a rock solid plan. I nailed my job, got a good ball strike, but the ball just didn't go over because I didn't judge the wind quite right. So the plan wasn't good. So that was Peter. So from there, I'd run back, get over halfway. I would have worked out which of the 3 it was. I'd then bend down and wipe my boot, which meant the kick was gone. The kick was wiped. I had to move on to my next job. So having a plan for when you're missing kicks is really important, because in games, if we don't get rid of that kick, things will just snowball and the momentum will go really negative rather than parking the kick and getting back to the positive.